All right. Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time yet again. Let's talk some metal. I'm excited to bring this one to you tonight because it has been a while since I have dug into my boxes of old, obscure American heavy metal singles from the 1980s. So I figured it was long overdue that I pull out some titles that you may not have come across before and play some cool tunes for you. And that's exactly what we are going to do. Been making videos very steadily lately. There's, of course, always a new video up on Tuesdays, as long as I can meet that schedule. And I've been doing, the heavy metallurgy streams over on Marty's Worm channel, which are always fun. There's just so much metal to talk about, so little time. But yeah, I feel like I've neglected the American singles a bit. And it's one of those little sort of corners of the heavy metal underground that I really love. I think there's a lot of cool tunes and cool bands to be discovered there. Things that never got much attention. These were bands that were only known in their region for the most part back in the day. A lot of them did not last very long. They made a single, maybe a demo or two, and that was kind of it. But a lot of them left some pretty cool tracks behind. You just got to dig them out. And here, I'm trying to shed a little light on them, give them their 15 minutes in the spotlight so that more people can be aware of them, because there is a lot of good music to discover here. Okay, one thing I do want to mention before I jump into the first one, if you, like myself, are sort of interested in these small time releases, privately pressed vinyls, singles in particular from American bands, there is a new online resource that is worth checking out. This is over at the Corosium website. Some people pronounce it Corosium. I say Corosium. Doesn't really matter which way you say it. It's an excellent website for folks that are pretty hardcore about collecting heavy metal, especially vinyl and CDs from the 1980s and 1990s. And they have recently added a section for reviews and lists on American 7-inch singles. They've had a similar page for a long time dedicated to the first wave of Swedish heavy metal 7-inch releases. But more recently, one of their longtime users and a good online buddy of mine, Christian from over in Sweden, has put in a ton of legwork to get a webpage offshoot dedicated to the American singles up there. So he's posting, dozens upon dozens of reviews. He has hundreds of more items that he's looking for and wanting to review in the future. So it's a section that could continue to grow for a long time and make a lot of information available to folks. The American single scene has not gotten nearly as much attention as scenes in, of course, the new wave of British heavy metal or the first wave of Swedish heavy metal. Those scenes have both had, books dedicated to them. The new wave of British heavy metal is widely known. Even if a lot of people don't dig into it incredibly deep, folks are at least aware of that scene. But the American scene has never gotten a similar amount of attention. Again, these were very small time bands, and unlike a location such as the UK or Sweden, these bands are spread out over a huge geographic area. So it was very hard to ever get them all amassed in one place where a lot of people would be aware of them. People in Arizona would know, the Arizona bands, maybe a couple of New Mexico bands. They weren't going to know much of anything about bands that were operating in Indiana or Kentucky or New England or other parts of the country. The United States is a pretty big place. But yeah, hopefully Christian's new addition to the Colosseum, the new wing of the museum, as you would, will give people a really good place to go and get some information about a lot of these cool singles. Another place you can look, of course, is here on the Let's Talk Metal YouTube channel. I've done several videos in the past featuring some of these singles, and I'll be doing more in the future. And that leads us to tonight's topic, where I've broken out 4 singles from the early to mid 1980s, and I'm going to play a little music and talk just a bit about them. So, without further ado, let's get right into the first one. We're going to start out in New Hampshire with a band called Hazardous Waste. They made one single in 1986, and this has Danger Zone on one side of it. The flip side is called Half-Life. So a little bit of a sort of dangerous radiation theme thing going on here. Before I say anything else, let's go to the tape and check out a little bit of Hazardous Waste playing a track called Danger Zone. right, let's cut it right there. Good cranking tune, but don't want to play the entire thing. Got to leave something for you to go check out on YouTube and dig up for yourself. That is Hazardous Waste with Danger Zone off of their only official release from back in the day, 7-inch single. Obviously features kind of a good punky vibe and energy to it. I wouldn't be surprised if they were influenced by the hardcore scene. That was, of course, a big thing in parts of New England, the Boston area in particular. They remind me a little bit in passing of some Boston area metal bands that, again, tended to have that more high energy, simple but driving beat approach that they were borrowing from their hardcore brethren. Little thing to note with the Hazardous Waste single, the picture sleeve on this is not an original artifact. When they made this single back around 86, the single just came in a plain white sleeve. There was no picture sleeve for it. At some point in the late 2000s, maybe the early 2010s, the band was contacted by dealers and collectors and such, and the picture sleeves were then made up to go with leftover copies that the band still had, and that got onto the market at that point. So these sleeves really didn't come out until roughly sometime 10, maybe 15 years ago at most. So yeah, the picture sleeve, if it looks a little funny to you, it should. If you look at it, the images on the back, it doesn't quite look like something that a band would have gotten printed up at a Kinko's or other type of copy shop back in the mid 80s. It's not. It was added later on. In true obscure American band form, Hazardous Waste did this one single. Both tracks on it are pretty good. Half-Life is similar, not quite as driving, but still a good tune. But yeah, other than that, they made, let's see, I'm not sure if they even made a demo, actually. There was a compilation, a CDR collection that was put out in 2007, but never got very widely circulated. And there's an EP listed from 2009 over on Metal Archives, which I do not know anything about. The 2007 compilation has the tracks from the single and supposedly other recordings done back in the 1980s. But that is everything that's come to light on Hazardous Waste. So cool little single, and because copies did come out onto the market in the past decade or so, it's not a particularly hard or expensive item to track down. So if that one caught your ear, you feel like you just got to have it in your collection, should be able to track it down with relative ease on something like Discogs, eBay, or other sites. All right, so we're off to a good start here, I do believe, and we're going to go from strength to strength, but we're going to have to move out of New Hampshire and over to Cincinnati, Ohio. Ohio, of course, had a real burgeoning heavy metal scene in the early and mid 1980s. It's a scene that sooner or later I'll get around to dedicating an entire video to. There's a lot of bands. It's going to take a lot of research, may have to be broken up into a few parts. So it'll take me a while to get all my thoughts together on that. But for tonight, we're just going to pay homage to one particular Cincinnati band, and that is Jonas Guthrie. Weird name, I know. I have no idea where it comes from. I don't think it has anything to do with the band members in particular. But regardless, they made one single in 1985 with the tracks Cry of the Ripper, and the flip side is called Short Engagements. So before I say anything else about Jonas Guthrie, let's play a clip of the track Cry of the Ripper, and we'll let your ears decide for yourself.
Our
there is a sampling from Jonas Grumby's only release back in the day, their 7-inch Cry of the Ripper backed with Short Engagement. Cincinnati band, as I mentioned before, strong new wave of British heavy metal influence, but a really tight tune. These guys really had their sound nailed down. Again, driving, forceful beats, a little bit like the Hazardous Waste track we started out with, but not so much a punky vibe on this one. Very tight, compact metal song to it. Really good tune. Sadly, the only thing they did release a demo tape, but that came out the following year, I believe, 1986. But that was the last anybody really heard of Jonas Grumby. Only one member appeared in another band, to my knowledge. Jim, is it Blinken? Make sure I'm probably mispronouncing it. Jim Brink was also in another band from that area called Thruster and contributed to their extremely good MIA cassette album back in the day. We'll save that one for another time and another video. But yeah, the Jonas Grumby single, just some little personal trivia associated with it here. This was one of the very first private pressed American singles that I ever obtained. And this was sometime in maybe the early 2000s, somewhere around there. I might have had a couple of singles before this, but mostly I had focused on new wave of British heavy metal singles. Then, as I made, more connections, started talking with people on different websites, I found out more and more about these US singles, and I had gotten a lot of them started getting a lot of them in trades for like CDR trades, download trades and things like that. But this was one of the first ones where I actually got a physical copy of it. And it was one that really caught my imagination. It's like, wow, if this is obviously a very small time act. Both songs on here are very short. They're both under 3 minutes. Nothing fancy on the picture sleeve. No other recordings out there. But if a band like that can put out something this good, then there must be others. There must have been a lot of other American bands out there that might have done the exact same thing. Very similar to what had happened with the new wave of British heavy metal. It's just that nobody had really documented this scene, so not as much was known about it. People were piecing information together on websites like the Colosseum, but it just didn't have the pedigree and the legacy that the new wave of British heavy metal did. So yeah, getting this single definitely sort of opened that door, kind of got my foot in there a little bit. So I was like, yeah, I'll have to try to track more of this stuff down. And now I have several boxes and a couple of hundred of these things laying around. But yeah, really cool tune. Shame they didn't get to put out more material, but they showcase, just how strong they could be. Is it the best song ever recorded? No, of course not. But for a small time outfit operating in Cincinnati in the mid 1980s, they show that, yeah, they could crank it out just as well as a lot of the primetime new wave of British heavy metal bands could. All right, now for single number 3 tonight, we're going to go to a state I don't think I've ever once referenced in a video, and I may never reference again. It's only maybe one other band I can think of that comes from the state of Nebraska. Not exactly a heavy metal haven, but there was a band back around 1983 that put out this. The band's name was King Cobra, and they made one 4-track 7-inch EP titled Think Fast. So let's take a listen to King Cobra. This is going to be the second track on side A, which if I remember right, double check, make sure I get the title correct here. It has a strange title called Revengeful Dreams. Is revengeful a word? I don't know. This isn't English class. We don't have to worry about it too much. But let's check out a little bit of King Cobra. I'll have to jump up to the right point in the track list here. So the way I've got this file made, we'll jump up to it in just a moment. Here we go.
Supposed to do. There's nothing in us to keep the quickness, getting the message through. Nothing but trouble, now it's all double. What can I even do? If I could find magic, then maybe I'll manage, find my way with you. I don't even know it. These dreams are mine. Revengeful dreams come to making, I ain't faking. These dreams are incomplete. They're not sleeping, I'm talking to them. They're out there in the street. They're not watching, and I'm not waiting to see what they will do. I got a line on how I'm living. I'm gonna run with you. I don't even know it. If these dreams are mine. Revengeful dreams in the morning. Revengeful dreams at night.
All right, there is a cool smoking little number from King Cobra out of Nebraska called Revengeful Dreams from their one and only 7-inch release in 1983, 4-track EP nonetheless. The King Cobra single showcases a band that probably still has a little bit of a heavy 70s hard rock and heavy influence, but there's enough bite to the guitars that it also sounds like very early 80s metal. They may have been checking out stuff like Riot and the Rods just a little bit, just as much as they were things like Thin Lizzy, which was probably a pretty clear and obvious influence on this band. So it's a cool little EP, very guitar driven, has kind of a little bit of a funny mix to it, but the sound is actually pretty good. Again, they're recording this in Nebraska or somewhere in 1983. You can only expect so much from a small-time heavy metal band. But yeah, very little information out there on King Cobra. This act is not listed on Metal Archives at all. One of that part of that may be the obscurity of the band. It may also be this is the kind of thing that some of the Metal Archives overlords sometimes will poo-poo a little bit as being, oh, that's just rock music. We don't put that on here. Except they have a giant entry for Rush, but hey, it's their website. They can put whatever they want to on it. There is an entry for King Cobra on Discogs, but again, very little information, just the band member names and sales history for the single, which doesn't look like many copies of it have ever turned up. I got just little bare bones information on the single out of this reference book. There's an entry in here that at least tells you where they were from and stuff like that. But again, not a whole lot out there. And unfortunately, with a very generic name like King Cobra, a little hard to dig up more stuff on them. You've got to try a little bit harder. I typed, King Cobra Nebraska band into Google, and I started getting links about, the snakes of Nebraska and how to identify them. Not exactly what I'm looking for. So there's probably some more information out there if you dig deep enough. It's not one I have followed up on over the years, but yeah, if anybody out there has more information about Nebraska's King Cobra, share in the comments down below, because it's a cool little EP. I'm glad I was able to pick that one up several years ago. All right, we have one last entry to do for the evening. For this one, it's going to be a New York band that was active at the very dawn of the 1980s, and they had the rather crazy and not quite unique name of FRIGID BICH. They left the T out of the spelling, probably to get around too many complaints being raised. But yeah, this New York band put out just one single in 1981. It includes the songs You're No Loser with the flip side containing Call Us Robin Hoods. And that is the track we're going to check out right now. So here is New York's FRIGID BICH cranking on a track called Call Us Robin Hoods. But don't you dare call us thieves.
Call us Robin Hood.
right, there is New York's Frigid Bitch shredding on Call Us Robin Hoods. Goofy name for a band, goofy name for a song, but really like that one. Good buzzy edge to the guitar, very fast, very aggressive. This is a 1981 single. This is 2 years before Metallica would release their first album. So I'm not sure what these guys were listening to. They got them so cranked up. Maybe they had heard some early Sweet Savage recordings, something like that, coming out of the new wave of British heavy metal and figured, hey, we can do that too over on this side of the pond. Frigid Bitch never got another release out back in the day. They did a lot of demo recordings, and they did get a track included on a fairly popular compilation called New York Metal 1984, which came out in 1984. So they did make another appearance on that vinyl compilation. Like I said, several demos recorded and have been circulated around online. I've got some live shows from back in the day. So the band was out and playing, trying to ply their trade a bit. But yeah, they never got another original vinyl artifact of their own back in the day. Now around 2010, let me double check. That sounds a little late on the date now that I'm saying it out loud. Probably earlier than that. They did get the anthology treatment. OPM Records out of Georgia did I think it was a 10-inch release in this case for the band. It's listed 2003. There we go. It's listed as the Anger, Attitude, and Anarchy, listed as an EP. But again, this was a much later collection that was put out on the very collectible and well done OPM Records label. There's been another compilation that was done in 2011 called Tyrants of a Generation. Don't know anything about that one. I've never come across it. So yeah, Frigid Bitch, cool sound. Last bit of trivia on them. They weren't the only band with that moniker, even though it's kind of a strange name. There was a band from Michigan that also called themselves the same thing, but they had the T in the name. They didn't omit the letter T, so it's spelled correctly, which right away should have doomed them to failure because you can't spell your band name correctly if you're a metal band in the 1980s. You got to find a way to misspell it. And the New York version of Frigid did just that. So that is all I've got for you tonight. So now let's talk metal in the comments down below. What do you think of these singles? Anything catch your ear? Does anybody know anything else about Nebraska's King Cobra and whatever happened to them? If you're interested in these, by all means, some of these are available on different collections here and there. You can find them on YouTube. Again, like I mentioned, some of these, like the Hazardous Waste single and the Jonas Guthrie single, have never been particularly expensive. I don't think the Frigid Bitch single's all that expensive either. I didn't check the sale history on Discogs, but in the past, it's not been one that was all that difficult to get for a reasonable price. So if you need to scratch that collector itch and go track these down, they should be relatively easy on the pocketbook. But with that, I want to sign off for the evening. So hope you enjoyed this look at the obscure underground American singles from the 1980s. So many great bands. We've covered only a few of these. I've just begun to scratch the surface. So hopefully in the future, we'll circle back to this and talk about many, many more. But until then, I've got to call it a night. So everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your heads.